G'day, my name is Jason Badower. I'm a comic book artist for DC Comics. Here's some of my stuff. I'm joining you from the future, which is now my future from this video, but your past. Come on, you got this. You're an X-Men fan. This is easy mode for you. Anyway, I'm calling from a future to introduce a series of conversations that I had about all the significant Wolverine movies leading up to Deadpool Wolverine. When I began these chats with my buddy and Marvel Living Library, Scott Stuart, who owns every single issue of the Avengers, I thought that these just might be fun conversations. A good way to get everyone and ourselves back up to speed before Deadpool Wolverine. We are now 4 movies in, and having just finished the Wolverine, I didn't expect these discussions to be so genuinely interesting. Well, for me anyway. Sure, we'll pull all the main trivia we heard about the movies, all the anecdotes and the hearsay, but we'll also bring our own opinions and also collect some others and discuss them too. But what gets me is that Scott and I have seen most of these films dozens of times in some cases. Yet somehow, in every single conversation about each one of these movies, Scott and I managed to discover something new together, some sort of deep insight into each of these movies that we didn't realize or have before. But if you're a Wolverine fan or X-nerd, this series is one of the deepest dives into what we consider the significant milestones of Wolverine's cinematic stories. Quick preface, I had a flood and I'm still rebuilding my art studio and filming space. I think the later videos look much cooler, so please bear with us. I hope you find our chats fun and hopefully valuable as we begin the road to Deadpool Wolverine. Hey everybody, welcome to the panel. This is where we look at the world through the frame of the comic book. My longtime co-panelist in crime is Marvel Living Library, Scott Stewart. You own every issue of the Avengers and you are closing in on every issue of Iron Man. How are you, man?
I'm good, mate. I'm really good. I'm glad to be here with you on this momentous occasion to celebrate the 15th anniversary of one of the best movies ever made.
Wolverine Origins. Just absolute peak cinema. The fact that there was no Oscar nominations, no Golden Globe, no BAFTA award for this absolute cinematic marvel. This is like snubbing Citizen Kane as far as I'm concerned. And I'm so excited today to go through and litigate why this should be reconsidered as one of the greatest superhero movies, greatest movies of all time.
Jackman's butt didn't get a Best Supporting Actor nomination. I will never understand.
Should have got 2 Best Supporting Actors nominations, one for each of those perfectly toned cheeks. A lot of work went into those. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jason Badower. I'm the artist of Joker Harley Criminal Sanity for DC Comics right now, working away on Volume 2, written by Cami Garcia. Scott and I sat down and we figured, okay, let's talk about the most important movies leading up to Deadpool Wolverine. What are the movies that we need to watch again? There are some that we're just not going to watch. Just recently, X-Men The Last Stand was actually marked by the United Nations as a human rights violation, so we're not going to be watching that again. Scott, do you even remember the list of what we're going to go through?
We're starting today with X-Men Origins, Wolverine. Then we're going to go with X-Men 1, X-Men 2, The Wolverine, Logan, Deadpool 1, Deadpool 2. And we'll probably end up talking about Deadpool Wolverine when it comes out. It would probably be the done thing at that time.
There are certain movies, some of them are going to be like, hey, you need to go back and rewatch this. It still stands up. It's great. Like, it's really worth the rewatch. Other movies, we are going to save you the time of rewatching them because this is absolutely just so mediocre. It's not funny. So what we will be doing today is going through the plot, and we will just in order, and we will be breaking down each part as we go through it. Normally, one way to do it is to go through and just list off the entire plot from start to finish, which to me always just sounded boring. So we'll just go through, recap each bit, talk about each bit, move on to the next bit, talk about that until we get to the end, and hopefully not want to become some sort of suicide statistic by the end of that, of litigating this movie. For those of you who are super keen on seeing Deadpool Wolverine and doing your homework beforehand, I broke my rule. I never watched trailers, I never watched teasers, and I watched them both just so I could take it on the chin. You really need to watch Loki. Loki Season 1 and Loki Season 2. If you are not convinced about watching Loki, go watch Scott's and my conversation about why you should watch Loki. Scott and I do 2 videos together, and I did a 3rd video about the issues that I had with him. But regardless, Scott, we can actually reference our own continuity now.
Oh God, that's a scary thing. Does that mean we need a why you should watch Loki video? And then will we need a why you should watch Loki video?
We have the Scott and Jace not so cinematic universe now. So the S&J NCU maybe?
The NCU. Yeah, I like that. That has a ring to it. It sounds vaguely like something that would be successful.
Except we're attached. They'd have to fire us. They could take that name and run with that. We have a continuity, man. That's crazy. So what we're going to do with these is cover Wolverine's role and journey and try and get an idea of where he's been and who he is by the time he goes into Deadpool Wolverine. And then we'll also go through Deadpool and figure out where he is at by the time he goes into Deadpool Wolverine to get a sort of an idea of lay the groundwork, do our homework and our foundations. I am slow. I am way behind on my X Universe stuff in the comics. Where are you at with X Comics at the moment?
At the moment, sputtered out during the Krakoa storyline, which I believe has recently wrapped up, and a new X Universe is on the way. I've always dipped in and out of the X-Men. I was not in on the X-Men when this movie was made, but at the time, I did read some of it because Matt Fraction was writing, so I did pick up some of it. A lot of the characters they chose to bring across were featured characters in the X comics at the time. For the people who know their X eras, this would be the Utopia era, when they first lived on an island.
I was actually quite surprised by the number of characters from the comics that they pulled into the movie. But I think what really got me is just how ashamed of the material. We're in that era of superhero movies where they are absolutely ashamed of the comics that spawned them, where they're trying to either make fun of them, rework it, relitigate it, and in any way, shape, or form try and avoid established continuity as much as possible to do their own reimagining of why things are the way that they are. So while we do see a lot of characters, they are flat out unrecognizable to me. I think like Kestrel, Will.i.am is probably the most accurate that I saw next to Logan himself.
Look, Fred Duke's The Blob I thought was pretty good. I'm not super familiar with Bolt from the comics, but I liked the little mousy guy from Lost's performance. I actually think they did a better than average job at the time for actually showing some love for the comics. Heather and Travis Hudson, the founders and leaders of Alpha Flight, make an appearance. They're the old couple in the movie, for those who've seen it.
Are you serious? Is that canon?
That's the characters. That's their names in the movie. And it fits with like Logan's journey. After he escapes Weapon X, he wanders the Canadian wilderness and they take him in as part of the Department H program, which he eventually leaves and joins the X-Men.
Oh my God, I had no idea. That's absolutely hardcore. I knew they did that in the comics, but I had no idea that was actually supposed to be them. For me, it was just so random. Maybe we should start going through the movie so that we can start inserting all this trivia into some sort of order, because editing Jace is going to hate us later, or I'm going to try and remember all that stuff about Guardian and Vindicator.
We're going to rag on this film a lot, but I swear it was pretty prescient. Because here in the year 2024, we'd all love to sew Ryan Reynolds' mouth shut. But at the time, it was widely panned as a creative choice. X-Men Origins Wolverine. It was originally conceived as the first of a series of standalone films for some of the breakout characters from the films. I think Storm was originally scheduled to be the second one. But yeah, this was such a resounding success, both creatively and financially, that they said, no, don't worry about it. And bringing up the $150 million budget and grossing 373, it's scrolled, I think that was the number. That 373 is a gross figure. So that's what, the sum of you and me and a million other people turning up and putting their money at the box office. 50% of that off the top stays with the exhibitor. When you factor in exorbitant marketing costs, that is barely a break even and probably a loss.
I've heard it's a good rule of thumb that whatever the budget of a movie is pretty much how much they're also going to spend on the marketing, which they never mention, but I've heard that is a rough figure you can go by, and if that's the case, then Jesus, with the 50% to the exhibitor, they're not making anything off this movie. Whereas
most movies, even ones that really bomb, eventually turn a profit. Certainly back in the day on home video and DVD rentals and so forth, it's very hard to get a Hollywood major studio production that eventually doesn't make its money back in one way or another. They do exist, but they're fairly rare. Even famous bombs usually claw their money back from the home market afterwards. But nobody gets into producing $150 million motion pictures to make a modest profit. They all want to make billions of dollars. So even if it did fall over the line and cover the interest bills, that's still viewed as a failure.
It's an expensive movie for $150 million, man. It does not look $150 million. To me, it's 80, 90 million. Like, I just watched Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, and holy cow, that movie looks amazing. Really great. Whereas this just doesn't. I guess the ending has the 3 Mile Island is quite a nice sort of CGI set piece. But other than that, I'm not seeing the money on the screen.
Not seeing the money on the screen at all. Those horrible CGI claws. Most of the CGI really lets this film down.
First, before we get into Wolverine Origins, absolutely spoilers for today. Absolute complete spoilers. We're going to go through the entire movie in minutia, and I actually consider it a public service. This is us taking on the chin, losing 2 hours of our life to save you anytime not watching this absolute. And look, here's the thing. I don't really like to rag on the hard work of other creatives. I also work really hard to keep all of this really PG, because especially when I go through this stuff, it's actually a real pain to go through and edit all the swearing and everything like that out. So that said, but me, this is a giant bag of dog. Like, this is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. It is the height of absolute studio mediocrity, where they were just interested in trying to convince people gullible enough to believe the marketing that this might actually be a good movie. Avoid this thing at all costs. And the other thing is, it just gets dumber every minute that it continues on. It is just absolute horse skull. What do you think, man? It's crazy.
I think the first look, if we're getting the swearing out of the way, hell damn ass. I don't think the movie's all that bad. I think the first half is actually pretty good. Sets up the relationships and dynamics really well. We get some fun superhero power bits along the way. It's when we get to Gambit and the island, everything really starts to fall apart. If it had a better third act, we might be thinking about it differently, because the first half isn't disgusting, apart from those CGI claws.
As we go through the movie, I will actually mark the point where I think it actually starts going downhill, because you're right. There is actually a point from the start onwards where it is actually watchable, and then it just Evel Knievel's off a cliff and just starts jumping shark after shark with all this stuff that it establishes in the early part that it just actively ignores to make the story continue. And I will go through that stuff that just annoyed the crap out of me as we get into it. If you want to save some time, this is basically the story about a lumberjack mourning his dead wife and then killing a whole bunch of people for revenge. I would recommend going to play God of War. It does the same thing much better than Wolverine Origins. I do not condone the imbibing of excess amounts of alcohol, but you could make a drinking game where, say, every time the Wolverine roars at the camera, you could do a drink. Every time he looks up and roars at the camera, you could do 2 drinks, and that would probably get you through this movie, because both those things happen many times.
If you want to do when you see Wolverine with his shirt off, you'll be fast. You want to see when Wolverine is completely naked, you'll get a good buzz on, because there's more than a few shots of. For 2009, that was pretty well stacked Hugh Jackman, and I have nothing but respect for the man for coming back to layer on the protein.
I gotta say, I think this is the prettiest Hugh Jackman that we ever got in all the movies. Like, he starts getting really jacked in the other ones. And I'm not saying that he doesn't look great. I think he looks absolutely superheroic and really absolutely Wolverine to me. But right now in Wolverine Origins, he just looks so pretty with his flowing perfect hair and his flowing perfect stubble and his ripped everything. And it's just absolutely peak pretty Hugh Jackman as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, they later recast him with a very similar looking actor, hughjackman.
I'm in the middle of the Hugh Jackman Rick and Morty episode where he's I'm just going to go off and go to the dunny and hang a huge ackman. It's an ackman. It's a look it up. It's Australian slang. It's like
yeah. We say that all the time.
As a piece of trivia, I think he lived in Mount Eliza at the time, and they were telling me that he would just really salt of the earth dirt. He would just be out there with his lawnmower, mowing the grass. He'd be mowing his grass all the time, and he'd be out there shirtless. And of course, every woman up and down the street would suddenly feel the need to do their own gardening while Hugh was out there tending his garden. It's a weird phenomenon, no correlation, just an observation.
Clearly, he's an inspiring presence. and his love of horticulture resonated throughout the town.
Let's get into this. Wolverine Origins. Anything you want to mention before we go through the movie?
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
I actually think the movie starts off reasonably strong. It is 1845. We meet a sickly young James who seems to be the son of a very rich man. It turns out the groundskeeper has been jumping his mum, and his best friend is actually now his brother, because the groundskeeper kills his dad and he goes into a berserker rage. Take your first drink, as young James screams into the camera, and then stabs and kills his groundskeeper father for killing his father. I believe this is based on Paul Jenkins.
Jenkins wrote Wolverine Origins, a limited series, and established for the first time a canonical origin for Wolverine. It had been hinted at and alluded to and gone back and forth on so many times. The James Howlett late 19th century origin is a Paul Jenkins creation.
Yeah, look, I think Paul Jenkins is absolutely amazing, and I get wanting to tell the origin, and I also get wanting to sell comic books. That book, I remember, just sold gangbusters at the time. It was all anybody was talking about. I do not think it has done any service to the character whatsoever. We never needed to know Logan's origin, or if Logan was his real name, or a fake name. For this movie, it plays with the mislead, because we have this sickly boy lying in the bed, and then we have this like sort of gritty, tough boy looking over him. And if I remember correctly, the Paul Jenkins Kubert series, they play with that mislead for quite some time, that you think that Logan is actually the tough boy, and then you find out that he's actually the sickly James in the bed. For my money, I just found delving into Wolverine's origin absolutely pointless and has lessened the character overall in my life. So he was a privileged little white boy who lived in a rich family that had to run away because he was a mutant. I don't think that adds anything to the character whatsoever.
No, I absolutely agree. The mystery of his origins was a huge selling point, a huge reason he was so popular. It gave the character endless story motivation, trying to find his origins, recollect his past, excuses to interact with every corner of the Marvel Universe. And they took that all away. Because even if Logan himself isn't fully aware of all the details that we, the audience, now are, there's no more tension for the audience because we know the answer. We can empathize with the character's journey, but we, the audience, are no longer on that ride with him.
Chris Claremont, who wrote The Uncanny X-Men for, I want to say 25 years. Is it that long? It was a really long innings.
It was a monumentally long run, equaled in commercial comics.
For its success and endurance and complexity and everything. And one of the things that Chris Claremont did was always hedging around Wolverine's origin. He would intimate that Wolverine was perhaps older than he looks. Logan would reference stuff that people would be like, hey, what? And he would just leave it. And you'd never know that if it was Logan just yanking your chain, or if it was actually something that he'd actually seen and done in himself. And I really liked the subtlety and the tightrope that Chris Claremont walked for those years that he built Wolverine up to be the character that we all know today. And again, just interrogating that origin, I didn't think added anything to the character. And I know here that they're literally, the sticker on the movie says Origins, and they're gonna go into everything and look under every rock. I think it adds anything to Wolverine either. He was a better character at the start of X1.
The Man of Mystery is absolutely part of the allure. It's the whole, as I said, it's the whole reason half the fandom was there. I think we've hammered this just overall decision to tell his origin in any medium fairly well.
I think probably what actually happened, because Marvel has done before with She-Hulk and Spider-Woman and other IP grabs, and that is to do it first in comics before the movies put their stamp on it. And credit where credit's due, the movie does follow in the footsteps of the comics. I'll give them that.
They really did take inspiration from the comics, the characters that were being focused on at the time. Do you remember Maverick? He was like a Jim Lee era creation, Mark Texiera drew. That's Agent Zero. It's the same character.
I think I'm not surprised that we are in an era where they are absolutely ashamed visually, very much of the characters. We see their names, we see sometimes echoes of their powers and who they are, but visually, and it really is typified in X1 of what did you expect, yellow spandex, and that line has echoed and rippled its way down for so many movies for so long, until Iron Man, and possibly even Thor. I think, was the first one where we actually get a character, a superhero, actually looking like their character for no reason, because Iron Man has a very functional costume, right? Like the suit, it's cool that the suit looks like a suit of armor, and so it's just adapting that from the page. But Thor, who could look like anything, he could have absolutely looked like anything, looked like Thor, right down at the giant circles on his costume, giant red cape, tiny little hammer. Whereas here in this movie, they are absolutely trying to change almost everything about all the characters, except for, as you said, Kestrel and Blob when we see him in his second form.
The big downfall, and it's hard to believe this came out like a year after Iron Man did, but it, of course, owes its design, aesthetic, and approach to the material to a decision that was made in the production of X-Men 1. So it's a dated take. It's a decade-old take, even by this point. And instead of using the before times as an excuse to go wild, they did very little other than allude to some of the characters' typical color schemes. I'm thinking of the stripes and the orange on the Wolverine jacket, and the Blob's outfit was an allusion to his outfit in the comics.
I do not remember the comic book Wolverine origins well enough, but one of the staples of the X-Men comics has always been Wolverine's feud with Sabretooth, Victor Creed. In this case, the character Sabretooth that we meet in X1 is not Victor Creed, as we know this character. They've been separated in the movies, and I actually think it's a really good call, because Tyler Mane was doing a great job with that Sabretooth, but we also need a Victor Creed character in Logan's life. And I really like this because one of my first ever comics, Uncanny X-Men 213, was one of the first comics I ever picked off the stands. Alan Davis cover of Wolverine fighting Sabretooth. And it is just one of those things that just grabbed my little post-pubescent brain and just hold me in. I remember that I was always an Avengers fan, and I saw that Wolverine fighting Sabretooth, and I just picked it up. I just had to. It was absolutely amazing. As I watched an interview the other day with Cyberpunk director Gabe Amantangelo, and he was wearing a jumper / sweater with the black and white artwork of that cover on the jumper, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And then Mark Silvestri grabbed that rivalry that Chris Claremont set up and artistically just elevated it to another level. And one of the things that I loved about it always is that, and this again is where the movie runs into some issues, is the visual part of it. Because Wolverine in the comics, I think, is 5'5", and Sabretooth is 6'6", and Wolverine was always the underdog. Despite having the adamantium bones and the claws, Sabretooth was always bigger and stronger and could heal just as fast. And so you had Wolverine's claws versus this guy that was just bigger and stronger, basically. And so it made for a really even battle the entire time. And the movie's built up to it in a different sort of way. What did you think of Victor Creed in the movie, Scott?
I'm a big Liev Schreiber fan. I thought he brought a real menace and bloodlust to the role, which you absolutely have to do to capture Sabretooth. I also agree that he's not extraordinarily reminiscent of the Sabretooth of the comics, but yeah, he's a gesture in that direction, and that's really all they do with any of the characters. They gesture in that direction. But in terms of the character that we got, absolutely, that was performance and a great contrast to Jackman's Wolverine. Jackman's 6'2" or 6'4" or something. He's a tall dude. And that was a mark against him when he first got cast. Because, yeah, we're all expecting this pipsqueak with small man complex. And, yeah, instead we get statuesque Australian.
It's one of the funny things that the movie does all these backflips and backsalts trying to justify his name of Logan and then the actual title of the Wolverine, which we'll get to, which in the comics is simply because he is a short, hairy Canadian dude with claws. That's his nickname. That's his handle. He's a Wolverine. Like, he looks like a Wolverine, he fights like a Wolverine, they call him the Wolverine. It's nothing more complicated than that, as far as I know, Scott. Like, I don't know if you have any more lore to throw at that moment.
They've retconned in similar things that they did in the movie, where it's his military code name and secret agent handle and things like that at various points along the way, but certainly his creation, first appearing in Incredible Hulk 180, although 181 is the famed first appearance issue. He's actually in the splash page on the end of the previous issue. And he was, sort of savage little berserker to send against the Jade Giant.
God, man, you have just inspired me that one of the things I would love to see is a Hulk Wolverine fight. But like a savage Hulk Wolverine fight. That would be amazing, because those of you who've gone back and seen like Hulk 340 onwards, I know they've tussled beforehand. Obviously, their very first appearance, Wolverine debuts fighting the Hulk, but they have fought through the century. God, I would love to see that on screen. I think it'd be pretty awesome.
Yes, getting it up there on the big screen is hopefully something we're going to get before 2030. Come on, Kevin. Chop, chop, chop.
Before Hugh Jackman dies of a protein overdose at this rate.
Or breaks his back carrying sacks of money.
Then in the movie, we get to my favorite part, and that is the montage through time. So from 1845, we now have Liv Schreiber playing Victor Creed, and we have Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine now, as they work their way through all sorts of different wars. Why these two Canadians are fighting in the American Civil War, I'll never know. Why they're fighting in World War I, sure, I can go with that. Same with World War II. The Vietnam War, again, a little bit wavy, but I thought the visuals and the ideas were absolutely incredible. In fact, I would go so far as to say this just should have been the movie. Them going through time, 3 acts, 3 different wars, and watching their relationship degrade as Victor becomes more and more of a monster, and just leaving it back in 1940 as the last time that they see each other. But obviously Hollywood needs to cover everything immediately. So it gets to the point where Victor is becoming more and more unhinged. He's committing war crimes. He attempts to rape a Vietnamese woman during the Vietnam War sequence. He is stopped by a senior officer. Victor Creed kills him, and Wolverine stops the other soldiers from killing Victor. They are sentenced to a firing squad, which obviously does not work. And then, how do we pronounce Colonel Stryker's actor's name? Is it Huston? Danny Huston?
Houston?
That's what I thought, but it's Huston. It's not Houston. Houston has an O in it.
The city does, but I don't know. His name doesn't. I'd have said Danny Houston, but yeah.
It may not be.
We're sticklers for detail here on the panel.
We will go with Danny Houston. And apologies, Mr. Houston Huston, whatever your name is, you are now Colonel Stryker. He pulls Victor Creed and Logan into his Team X. Says basically, do you want to stop running anymore? Come and join my secret government works team, and I will look after you. And it seems like he does. The next time we see them is on a plane on their way to Lagos, Nigeria, and we see the rest of the team. Can you remember who any of the other guys are, Scott?
Yeah, there's John Wraith, known as Kestrel in the comics. I don't think they made a reference to that, because his name of Wraith is actually much better for his power set, which is teleportation.
And he's played by will.i.am from the Black Eyed Peas, of all things, because sure. And he, for the most part, I think does a decent job with what he has to do. There's a couple times where he's not great, but for the most part, he's more than serviceable in the role.
I thought he was good. I enjoyed his fight with Victor later in the film. There was Fred Dukes, the Blob.
Who is not yet the Blob, who's just... That was the thing that weirded me out, because the Blob in the comics has always been the Blob. Like, I always got the impression that his mutant power was the fact that he was just a ginormous being. Like, it wasn't just fat, as it's implied in the movie, because that all he does is become just the butt of fat jokes. Like, he's just an immovable, large, super-powered being, to the point where not even Colossus could move him, the X-Man covered in metal with incredible strength. And that was his mutant power on Freedom Force with the team that he was on. But now having, like, Fred Dukes actually have this sort of PTSD, guilt-induced eating disorder, that was just weird for me. But I was just like, why have him? Just why? Why?
Look, he was a visual, a Major X character with a legacy throughout the run of the books. He's not like the Kingpin, where the Kingpin is large, but in storyline, it's dense muscle, and that's why he's strong. He's fat. He traps people. They punch him, and he traps them in his belly fat and laughs. Yeah, I didn't object to it as much as you did, although it certainly wasn't a nuanced and sensitive portrayal to either PTSD or eating disorders.
It was, I mean, that's the thing. It's like literally when people talk about, oh, it's not what I eat, it's my genetics. The Blob in the comic books is absolutely genetics in his case. So, as you said, he would literally use his body, his mutant fat, to trap people's hands and stuff like that. I never got the impression that it was actually like because he just ate Slurpees for breakfast. Like, it was just genetically, it was in the same way that some of them are beautiful and ripped, the Blob just got the other end of the stick.
In canon, there are plenty of mutants who, grow feathers out of their ass and have these and disfiguring mutations. And we got a bit of a glimpse of some of that later in the movie. But yeah, not all mutations are a gift of a perfect body and awesome things like eye blasts or wings.
Most of them were called the Morlocks, and they would live in the tunnels underneath New York. But at the time, they were originally ruled over, protected by a woman by the name of Callisto. But yeah, all the mutants that couldn't pass for human would all live in the tunnels underneath New York. And so the
tunnels being a polite euphemism for sewers.
Yes, absolutely. Then we had Dominic Monaghan, who you mentioned from Lost and Lord of the Rings. He was one of the hobbits, playing Chris Bradley, aka Bolt, who was also called Maverick, by the way. Apparently they really liked that name.
Hard to trademark, I imagine. But yeah, I'm not really familiar with him from the comics. I think he was very much introduced in just before that Utopia era and was focused on there. But yeah, I can't tell you much about him or how accurate the character is. But the sort of creepy childlike house he lived in was really, really good character beat. And the dude's a good actor. Like Liv Schreiber and Hugh Jackman, they carry the material they were given.
I hate to use a big brushstroke here, but I thought every actor on screen was genuinely trying their best and succeeding to relative degrees. It was the material that they were given that was absolutely problematic. There was a moment when Silver Fox is crying and I'm like, oh my God, like you are getting some genuine emotion here in a film that makes little to no sense. Like, well done, lady. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, everybody tried. Except maybe Taylor Kitsch. He might not have had his working shoes on, but yeah, pretty much everybody else did.
In Taylor Kitsch's defense, apparently he's really good in Friday Night Lights. I've never found a hook for him for me. I've never really gotten into any of his work. I know they pushed him really hard with John Carter and a whole bunch of other stuff at the time. He was one of the hot male actors that they were really banking on. In his defense, I think there is absolutely nothing for him to work with in this movie. And that is typified the best by the time that he gives Logan a ride in the plane and they have nothing to talk about. There is no purpose for the scene other than to literally physically get the characters to the next part of the plot, and they have to show it, but it is just this minutes of dragging conversation. And again, they're both trying. There's Jackman, we know, is a fantastic actor, and I really felt like Kitsch was trying to bring something, but he had absolute donuts to work with.
Yeah, it's definitely not a lot on the page for him. He was supposed to be a smouldering, brooding presence, and he had the visual look of that down.
Yeah, we'll get to Gambit more. So then we had Daniel Henney, as you said, another super strong, super fast, super soldier who could just shoot things really quickly. And he was called Agent Zero, also known as Maverick in the comics, as you mentioned. And of course, the little character that no one's ever heard of called Wade Wilson, played by another actor no one ever heard of ever again, called Ryan Reynolds. And it is actually that Wade Wilson. It was supposed to be Deadpool. And we'll get to that. We'll get to Deadpool when we get to Deadpool. So they're flying to Lagos, Nigeria. Everybody establishes their superpowers as they assault this warlord for what we think is his diamonds. Everybody uses their superpowers except for Logan, who seriously just wanders along for the ride. It turns out that Colonel Stryker is not interested in the diamonds at all. He's instead interested in the meteorite on the warlord's desk, which we later find out is adamantium. They go. Any thoughts on the assault, Scott, before I get to the village?
It was a fun enough little scene. Established Zero and Creed being able to climb walls and things like that. Functional.
I think the two most important things that it establishes is that James is now known as Logan and that he does not like flying, which is the only thing they managed to call back with that terrible scene with Gambit, showing that, oh no, we have structure, we remember things that we have written, we are writers. It should be mentioned, if we're going to get into it, I do not really know much of Skip Wood's work, the other writer who worked on this. I think he wrote Swordfish, A Good Day to Die Hard, and The A-Team. And of course, his writing partner on this was David Benioff. Yes, Game of Thrones, David Benioff. And while we can throw shade at his later work, I still maintain over the course of those first, say, 4.5 seasons is some of the best adaptation work I have ever seen from transferring one media to another media. Dude is one of the best adapters in the business. He just ran out of material to adapt. All right, so they all use their powers except Logan, who does nothing. And the other piece of writing that we get here to set things up is Wade would be the perfect soldier if they would just sew his mouth shut. You got to remember that, because it means that they planned to do things later. It wasn't just some spontaneous, oh, let's just do that. No. They're planning to do these things later on. Set up, foreshadowing, structure, people. They go to a village and they go to interrogate people. We learn two things here. One is that Stryker is absolutely after the meteorite. But the most important thing that we learn in this scene is that Logan, Wolverine, can detect lies, even in another language that someone is saying to him, despite everyone constantly lying to him for the rest of the movie. This one time, he's apparently can tell and then never uses it again.
One character
for years lying to him. Anyway, so no one wants to say where the meteor comes from. So Stryker orders Victor to start murdering everybody. Wolverine rebels, stops Victor Creed from doing so, and eventually ends up quitting the team. Because war crimes are not cool, man. Because apparently attempted rape is okay. You can kill a couple of people, but there's apparently a line in the sand that Wolverine's just not cool with.
Look, we're still barely out of the opening credits montage here, but so I don't want to slow us down. But throughout that, you see Logan slowly becoming more and more uncomfortable with Creed's attitude and callousness. I think it's built really effectively. The credits montage is well shot and propulsive, gets a lot of storytelling out of the way really well. And at this point, they're still moving at a really brisk pace.
I really love that opening credits sequence. There is a part of me that sort of headcanons that in the comics canon that Wolverine has done stuff that is not appropriate for the comics code. We will never actually see it. We never want to know what this man has done because he always does seem to have a repair arc for him in the comics. Like I always got the impression that he was, Black Widow always says, I've got red in my ledger, but I always thought that Wolverine was the first one that did that. It's like, I've done bad things and that's why I'm here to help, to try and make the world a better place.
Very explicitly, he couldn't control his berserker rages, and he had done things that he wasn't proud of that troubled him, that kept him awake at night. It was part of not just him trying to be a good man or whatever that means, but simply trying to heal. A lot of his reason for staying with the X-Men was a therapy/memory exploration conducted with the team's resident telepaths.
He was absolutely trying to get a hold of that berserker rage. Here's a comic book character question. Is the berserker rage part of his human personality or amplified from his mutant gene? Or is it his mutant power?
His core mutant power is the healing factor. The bone claws are what the comics class as a secondary mutation. The adamantium obviously is inserted. He also has heightened senses, the I can tell when you're lying thing. But that is generally, I think, chalked up to his time living in the wilderness and essentially living as an animal, so taking on their strengths and behaviors. I think the berserker rage is just angry short dude syndrome.
Somewhere along the line, someone posited the awesome idea that the healing factor was exaggerated by the Weapon X program, and that actually what enabled him to go through the procedure is his main mutant power, which is to resist pain. Because no human being could go through that procedure and come out sane because it would just be so much pain. And that was the sort of thing that I think that they allude to with Victor later on, but they never explicitly say why he couldn't get the adamantium bones either. But it was the idea that one of Wolverine's powers is just the ability to deal with pain. And I think it just makes so much sense because one of the coolest ideas too is that every time he pops his claws, it is breaking through his skin, like it hurts. And one of the coolest things in what I think is the second best sequence in this movie, when he goes through the adamantium procedure and you see the bones of his hands sliding aside as the blades come out, I thought was absolutely top shelf. Hats off also, I know we'll get to this in X1, but originally in the comics, Wolverine's claws would come out of sheaths at the top of his hands rather than between the knuckles, which I just thought was one of the best revisions. I did see a picture on Deadpool Wolverine where he does have the sheaths on the back of his hands. So I'm very curious as to what they're going to do.
Look, as much as you can imagine a functional wrist with extra solid bones that go back down into here, somehow it has functional wrists. But yeah, I like the positioning. It explains how he can pass for human. He's not deformed and has extra ridges and things. And having to change the shape of his hand to take on the extra mass of the adamantium. It was just one of those, little well thought out things that they do pepper through the film, but very much as an occasional garnish.
Cut to Wolverine, Logan, who has now been living in the Canadian Alps for the last 6 years, suffering from PTSD nightmares. Yes, roaring and screaming at the sky. Please take 2 drinks if you're playing along with our game. And working as a lumberjack, shacked up with Lynn Collins playing Kayla Silverfox. Meanwhile, Dominic Monaghan has been using his mutant gift to control technology and is retired from the Wetworks team also, and he's visited by Victor Creed, who kills him. We can only imagine because he's taking powers from him, although we never see his powers being used ever again. Then Stryker and Agent Zero come over to visit Logan and tell them that Dominic Monaghan has been killed. Stryker explicitly lies to Logan and says, I do not know who is doing this. And somehow Logan does not detect a lie in a guy that he does not trust as far as he could throw himself after he's had adamantium infused into him. Stryker wants to team up, and Logan won't have any of it. He also says to him, Wade is dead. I do not know who's doing this. I am lying to you. You could detect lies from across a clearing in another language. And Wolverine also has crazy sense of smell. The fact that he can't smell his brother on Stryker.
Maybe Stryker is fastidious about showering and laundry. He seems that sort of uptight sort of dude to be a bit OCD.
Yeah, sure. We then get our bonding moment with the token girlfriend at this stage, the school teacher who may or may not be a mutant. And the only good thing in it is that we do get the classic Wolverine line, I'm the best at what I do, and what I do is not very nice. And I was pretty happy that they managed to squeeze that in. Why does he want you back? Because I'm the best at what I do, and what I do isn't very nice. It works really well. She then...
Despite the fact that they skip over much footage of him doing any of that, he's generally just following Victor around while Victor kills people and going behind his back. The best what he does is frown impotently.
In fact, in that flashback is also one of the scenes in World War I where we get the back-to-back moment where they have their own personal tactics. Coming back to Kayla Silverfox, I got really confused by the story that she tells him about the Moon's lover being tricked to leave to get flowers and being trapped outside the spirit realm, and it turns out the Moon's lover was a Wolverine. And it's just like, why is she telling him this story? What bearing does it have? It makes absolutely zero sense.
It's in there for the same reason that Star Wars A Solo Story told us why Han Solo has a yellow stripe on his pants. It's because bean counters think that's what we're interested in.
So the next day, she is stopped by Victor Creed and fakes her own death by using a chemical that suppresses her heart from a guy that can hear someone say things 30 feet across a room while being submerged in liquid. But apparently Wolverine was not looking for a heartbeat at this point when he found his supposedly dead girlfriend. How does he react? Roars, yells at the sky, take 2 drinks.
Very well, since you've asked.
This to me also marks the point where the movie starts defecating in its own pants repeatedly and pretending like nothing is happening. Like it's just pretending I'm a normal movie. But no, from this point on, it starts crapping itself so incessantly everywhere. And I actually think that up until this point, I was like, this is an okay movie. And it was from her death onwards that I was just like, oh my God. I was even willing to let go all the times that they're lying to him, that he can't smell things, that he can't detect things, and just being like, all right, what?
How does he know that it was Sabretooth that killed her?
Because he did the claws on the car, and apparently he can recognize the claw marks on the car.
So not from the smell. Right. Okay.
He does track Victor to a nearby bar, and he gets his butt completely kicked by Victor. Now, I get one of those things that I always say in movies that I always have a real trouble with. Having studied martial arts myself, if you do not keep doing them, you lose it really quickly. So the idea that Victor has been constantly training all this time and fighting and killing people while Logan has just been fighting dead trees, I get. But for it to be such an absolute one-sided butt kicking was like... And here's the problem too, where visually in the comics, like if you had The Rock here, you'd be like, all right, I get it. You're going to need some adamantium dude to fight this guy. But even just the way that they fought was like, it's one of those key moments of the film that just doesn't land. I felt that Victor needed to be way more savage, way more brutal, way more definitive in his butt kicking.
Look, obviously it's meant to establish him as a real threat to Logan, as a dominant challenge for him to overcome. But it does fall a little flat. The awful CGI doesn't help. really takes you out of the scene when it's there. And ragdoll physics over the log truck, and really, really poor execution. It's the first of, if they'd just taken a bit more time, done a second pass on the effects, maybe we'd have had something. But no, they went with what they had, and what they had fell flat.
Again, we come back to things which Marvel, the MCU, have solved so well since. Because you think of the fight between Bucky and Captain America and the Winter Soldier, that knife fight, and how absolutely brilliant that was, and how subtle the wire work was, and all the superheroic shenanigans of both those characters are stronger than Wolverine and Victor. My point is that there is a way to shoot this sort of stuff that really makes it work. They could have had a really fun fight between the Bone Claws and the Claws. And we ended up getting something that just wasn't as imaginative as it could have been.
The fight that always stands out to me in Winter Soldier is the elevator fight. Precise choreography, really short space. You can follow everything. It all makes logical sense. Nobody's where they shouldn't be at any point in time. It looks awesome, and puts over somebody as really competent and good, instead of just, I'll throw you around a bit and then walk away for some reason.
Both those fights are ridiculously sharp, with great storytelling that absolutely feel superhuman without feeling like there's any sort of that crazy wire work going on. Even the Bucky Cap Black Panther fight, even the Iron Man fight at the end, that movie is full of just so many incredibly good fights. It is shocking the Russos and their stunt team just doing. The guy who choreographed it, if I remember correctly, like actually plays one of the Caps, and I think his son plays the other Captain America, which is pretty cool. Really talented dude. I wish I could remember his name. Then we get to the best part of the movie, and that is when Logan finally agrees to undergo the adamantium procedure. He orders new dog tags. For some reason, despite his name being James, he's decided to stick with the name Logan that he came up with while being in an illegal wet works assassination unit. Means something to him now. Think I might hang on to it. So the other thing I realized, by him choosing to keep the Wolverine name, if he's doing it from the story that Silver Fox tells him, is acknowledging that he's being tricked out of the spirit realm. It's this really disempowering choice that he is making to take on that Wolverine name.
It doesn't really work. It's this awkward analogy. When they call back to it in the climax of the movie, it makes even less sense that he's only just figuring this out. But yeah, look, you can't have him get shot in the head and then only have this dog tag to misdirect him for the rest of his life, unless you have this convoluted and unlikely decision-making process in the middle of your otherwise terrible movie.
100%. Oh my God, 100%. So then we get into my favorite part of the movie, and that is when he undergoes the procedure, which is absolutely amazing. I think, if anything, I would have loved it to have just been longer, to have been more painful, more traumatic, just to see more of the physicality of it. I know it's a PG movie and there's only so much stuff that you can actually show, and I think they did a good way of surfing around the edges of it, but I think there could have been ways of seeing actually the adamantium infusing into him would have been really cool. But then, submerged in some liquid, he manages to hear Stryker order to have his memory wiped from at least 30 feet away, a long way away. Wolverine can super hear him, still can't hear his dead girlfriend's heartbeat, but can hear this.
Sound travels really well through water. I assume that's really all he was in.
I love that. I love how he busts out, and instead of just killing everybody in the room, he just runs. Like, for no reason. He just legs it.
That's setting up things later in the film, where after he gets in front of the people he's sworn to kill, he just goes mad and walks away.
Which he does. Oh my God, we're going to get to that, because I thought I was the only one that was just like, why is he walking away right now? So he managed to escape. He dives down a waterfall. He gets rescued by Maren Parkent, who you now tell me, Heather Hudson, Guardian and Vindicator from Alpha Flight. I had no idea, because in the comics they find Wolverine just wandering through the Canadian wilderness and rescue him and take him into their Department H, which is Canada's Weapon X. Is it their Weapon X program or just their superhero defense program?
Yeah, it's a government department. It's superhero defense, military attached sort of thing. It's not really Weapon X, which was all about secret experiments and building a super soldier. They might have had similar overall public-facing goals, but the methodology of the operations was very different.
Yeah, got it. We're up to the scene where Martin Parr Kent pretty much take him in, and you cut to the scene, which is him popping his claws for the first time in the bathroom, and they are just composited these CGI claws in, and they are just absolutely awful. This is after X1 9 years earlier using practical claws and looking absolutely amazing. And I don't understand why they wouldn't just use practical claws and add CGI sparks or something like that. But whoever made that choice to be like, yeah, we could do that, that is a fireable offense, I'm afraid.
They're not even well rendered. They're just two-tone.
Like the sort of, hey, we're just going to do an animation proof. It's not going to look right, but I just wanted you to see if the animation looks good. And be like, yeah, that animation looks good. Wax some metal on that. Let's see how it goes. Oh, we forgot.
6 months before the release of this film, a work print leaked to the internet. And for those who don't know, a work print is at a given time where the movie is. They put all the bits together and watch it through, and it's filled with unfinished effects shots, and it's not been color graded. It's really instructional for those who like to get into the technicalities of filmmaking, to actually sit down and watch and see it in this state. And this is barely 6 months before the theatrical release of the film. They clearly made some decisions on what they were going to be able to do in the time frame, and it's a real casualty of the we have to meet the release date rather than we have to get the film finished philosophy.
Yeah, it's just shocking with that much money being thrown at it, just how brutal some parts of the final product look. Some look quite good, like the actual second director stuff, all the helicopter shots where they're going over the Canadian Rockies just look absolutely extraordinary. As you mentioned, the inside of Bolt's, Dominic Monaghan's caravan is absolutely incredible also. There are some beautiful parts to this movie. So Logan has been taken in by this old couple. He's hunted down by Agent Zero, armed with a whole bunch of helicopters and Humvees. Logan manages to kill them all, and in a giant explosion managed to walk away from it without looking at the explosion. If you ever want to see a great film that rips off that, I do recommend The Other Guys with Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. Do a great take on walking away from explosions. It still makes me laugh.
Andy Samberg on SNL did a music video, and the song was Cool Guys Don't Look at Explosions.
That's right, he did too. He was rocking it with those songs for a long time, my God. So with Agent Zero's failure, Stryker decides to get a gun with adamantium bullets. Makes sense at this point. Meanwhile, from out of nowhere, we cut to a school where Scott Summers is getting detention for some reason. He's then captured by Victor and Stryker. We now know that they are working together, even though Wolverine should have figured this out well earlier than this. In fact, there is no reason why Victor wouldn't have even been at the adamantium surgery. There's no reason for the ruse to keep going on once they've got Logan in the pool. Victor and Stryker have a chat.
That would have been a suitably bastard move too. You're in the pool, you're in the greatest pain of your life, and then Victor pops over and waves while he's lying in the bed. That is absolutely the sort of thing I would have done if I was Stryker. Luckily for the world, I'm not.
Scott, you would have made a much better supervillain than Stryker did. I'm sorry that your life has not extended that level of privilege so that you could become a supervillain. I'm sorry, dude.
I didn't have to suffer through having a mutant son like he did. The poor man's put upon.
So here's what gets me. When he fled the facility, the main person that chased him out of that was Agent Zero, just shooting at him, and he just runs out of the room. Maybe he doesn't know he's bulletproof yet. He just runs, and he's probably in the waterfall being like, hey, none of those bullets actually hurt me. God damn. But at this point of the game, he's taken Agent Zero out. There is nobody else apart from Victor. He doesn't even know Victor's working for him at this stage yet. He still hasn't figured it out. Why he does not go back to the facility is just beyond me. Logan becomes convinced that there is an actual facility that Stryker is working out of, and that he has to find the location of that. So he rides his bike from somewhere in Canada to Las Vegas, where will.i.am is working. I couldn't help it. I had to Google map this. Roughly from the middle of Canada is somewhere around 30 hours on a bike. Just the first of many journeys that Logan's about to make.
I'm reasonably sure that they establish it as northern Canada too. So we're not talking about the middle of Canada. We're talking, look, he's lucky he has a healing factor, because otherwise that is some serious chafing.
guy's just... And again, he's got no money. The Hudson's house has been blown up. What is he using for gas to fill the bike? It's just... What the hell? And why couldn't he make a phone call? Anyway, he gets to Vegas and he finds will.i.am and... who's the teleporter John Wraith, and he finds Fred Dukes, who is ballooned out from PTSD, eating disorders, and is absolutely now a gigantic, obese, superpowered dude, who insists on boxing, and Logan has one of the worst choreographed, pointless, goofy boxing fights with him for no reason.
There was a flying elbow from the middle rope. My friend, that was a wrestling match.
Logan brought a metal elbow to a boxing fight, and thank God he did, and put us all out of his goddamn misery. And it was just absolutely pointless. So anyway, it turns out Fred Dukes doesn't even know where the island is, but he knows of someone that escaped from the island. So off will.i.am and Logan drive on their bikes to New Orleans from Las Vegas. Again, another 25-hour drive. 25 solid. And as if they're not stopping. And I'm guessing John Wraith would probably have to take a break, even if Logan didn't. Ridiculous.
I imagine he would just teleport 100 kilometers up the road and wait for Logan at the local diner, have a coffee, a nice meal. I don't think he was sitting on a bike that whole way.
See, I never got the impression that John Wraith could teleport very far. Like, it was always a vicinity teleport until we actually see the Deadpool actually uses his powers and teleports to the top of a coolant tower. But John Wraith is only just teleporting very small distances. In fact, we actually see him on the bike next to Logan, both of them riding along together. So I don't know if he's actually doing that, but I like to think that maybe if I had teleporting powers, that's what I'd do.
If he can teleport his clothes, he can teleport the bike he's holding, surely. But I just think it's really cute you took my throwaway gag seriously and interrogated it as a story beat.
Your throwaway crap is better than what we actually got. So,
look, throwing crap is how we got into this mess. Let's change the metaphor.
They get to New Orleans and they find Remy LeBeau, Gambit, being played by Taylor Kitsch, who is doing the best he can with absolutely nothing to work with. Meanwhile, will.i.am sees Victor Creed and decides, oh, I'm going to have a piece of that. I'm going to take Victor out, which to me is the same sort of headspace as like a 6-year-old trying to beat Conor McGregor. He has seen what this guy can do. He's unarmed. He knows the guy has a healing factor. He knows the guy could probably heal from his punches faster than he can deliver them. What on earth is he thinking? He dies and Victor takes his powers.
Look, it was a good death. I liked the conclusion to the fight where Victor picks his patterns and puts his hand where he's going to teleport into. Again, it's not a bad conception, just a failed execution.
They always say that the biggest impact that can be made on a movie at any time is at the scripting stage. And I don't know if they were just writing this thing as they were shooting it, but there is so much here that is so set up, it makes me believe that there's the mediocre committee that okayed this piece of crap signed off on it. They were all like, yes, we have all agreed that we know this is a nonsensical mess, but hey, it's a superhero movie and it's got Hugh Jackman in it. Everybody will love it. And they all got slapped in the butt for it.
Just because there are like only 2 credited writers on the screenplay doesn't mean there are only 2 writers who worked on the screenplay. There are more than likely a half dozen drafts of this film, and some bean counter picked which parts of each draft he wanted smashed together. And I'm assuming the dude was gay or a woman, because there's a lot of naked Hugh Jackman that he picked from every draft. Oh, there's a nude scene there, there's a nude scene there.
Or just in marketing and just knew what would sell.
Yeah, well, yeah. We're steamrolling past the most likely option. How could we exploit this for as much money as possible?
Equal opportunity exploitation. Good work, Fox. Love your work.
X-Men Origins, Fant Four Stick, triumphs of cinema and great comics adaptations. Luckily, they'd spent however much money they'd spent on acquiring some of the most famous and compelling comics IP that exists, and just turning out smears on toilet paper after smears on toilet paper.
So while we're going down this tangent, we got Marvel, Sony, Fox, and the DC Extended Universe. Do you want to rank them in order as to who you think could best or worst to best, however you'd like to do it? Quick PSA that there's one of these deep dives coming each week. Please consider subscribing and the algorithm gods will let you know when the next one is up. And if you consider popping your claws on that like button, that'd mean the world to us. And maybe you'll help this video get to another Wolverine fan so that they can join the chat too. Or maybe just send it to a Wolverine fan that you know.
Wow. Obviously, Marvel is winning. Clearly. It's not who comes first. It's like a who comes second. Because for every triumph that Sony has had, they've lent on Marvel to really deliver them. Venom was a success, ironically. It was not a success on its own merits. I haven't suffered through Morbius or Madam Web yet. I believe it or not, I've not been that drunk. But, God, it's hard to give them any points. What did Fox at least did X1, which we'll figure out whether it holds up shortly, 2, which probably does. I hope it does, because I really loved that movie at the time. X-Men First Class is really good. I have to go Fox second. The DCEU means the only good films we're looking at, the first Wonder Woman, the first Aquaman, which people would take issue with both of those choices. Aquaman more than Wonder Woman, but I still think they're both pretty good. And a whole bunch of really well-shot creative failures under Zack Snyder and David Ayer. Shazam is really good. The sequel didn't live up to it, but sequels rarely do. It didn't besmirch the original. I'm gonna give it to DC, I think, because the Fox successors are older and less true to the comics. If I have to decide on something arbitrarily, those are my criteria. It's Morbin dime.
I see that Spider-Man 1 and 2, very long time ago, right up there with X-Men 1 and 2, cancel each other out. As in terms of they're both two great movies from each of the two studios. You are absolutely right, X-Men First Class is actually probably one of the shining examples. I know Venom was successful, did not enjoy that movie at all, really enjoyed X-Men First Class on the other hand. Despite how atonal and off-base they do things with Man of Steel, I just really feel like that there was at the end of the day, almost all these movies are far more consistent in quality.
It's a very brown and grey schmear.
Yes, absolutely. We watched Quantumania together, and that was such a piece of mediocrity, but it's so much better than Wolverine Origins, which we are tearing to shreds.
Yeah, leagues better, and still not that great.
So coming back to comic books, Scott, you and I constantly mention how much we love the misunderstanding fight in a superhero movie. It is a staple. We love it. And yet this misunderstanding fight with Remy LeBeau Gambit is one of the greatest wastes of time, of pointless pseudo-spectacle with no chemistry. There is a moment where Remy is coming down as Wolverine is fighting Victor, and he sees the guy, Victor, who probably captured him and took him, and yet he continues to go after Logan. It's just one of the most jaw-droppingly nonsensical, boring fights I've ever seen in my life.
I didn't think it was boring. I actually liked some of the comic book touches in it. The effect of Gambit with the deck of cards was really cool and comics influenced. I liked Wolverine, even though it makes no sense and looks a bit dopey. I really liked him hacking slices off the fire escape.
I don't know why I like that too, actually. I was okay with that. It was absolutely goofy, but there was something Wolverine to it.
There's something Wolverine about it. I enjoyed the scene itself as an isolated object, but yeah, in the context of the narrative, it's like Gambit is attacking the guy who showed up to hunt down his enemies because he got there first. And then he sees one of the guys who put him in prison, had scientific experiments performed on him and I'll pick on the guy that wants to take him out. That seems like a logical character choice. It was a misunderstanding fight, but the misunderstanding was in the audience going, why are these guys fighting?
Why are they still fighting? Because if Remy had turned at that moment and been like, oh my God, you were legit, and then used that moment to actually build trust with Logan, then I would have actually understood that. But no, Wolverine has to slap him around until he'll actually agree to help him.
And all he does is get cornered and beaten up and fall on the ground a couple of times, and then, yeah, all right, I'm no longer trying to hurt you or kill you. We're now buddies, and we're going to try and have a little buddy cop tension going on. And this is not a reflection on either actor's talent. Sometimes people just don't have chemistry together. You get it in wrestling a lot. Two really good workers have good matches with lots of people, but you put them together and there's something falls flat. Hugh and Taylor just didn't have chemistry. They weren't aided by the script. They weren't firing off each other in that sort of intangible way either.
I hate to say it. I have no idea why for Gambit they didn't put Ryan Reynolds in that role. That's exactly who you need. The snappy, pattering guy who's just annoying Wolverine all the time.
Because Ryan Reynolds' accent would have been even worse than Taylor Kitsch's.
I'm here for you, Ryan. I believe in you. I know you can do a French accent for us. Ryan Reynolds would have been a better Gambit than the Deadpool. Logan finally slaps Remy around, who agrees to fly him to Stryker's secret location, which is on 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. So at least Logan gets one journey in this movie that probably only takes him about an hour or so to get there. And because the writers want to show us that they have actually structured this entire thing, despite Gambit and Logan having absolutely nothing to talk about during the entire fight, they remember to bring up the Wolverine doesn't like flying. What I'm really curious is to go back to check out X-Men 1 and see if Wolverine still hates flying in that. I think there is a reference to that, but for them to just belabor this point so much is just unbelievable. The other thing too is that, so Gambit flies him over, they have their vacuum of a conversation, and Wolverine decides, you know what I'm going to do? Now that I'm covered in pounds of metal on my bones, I am going to leap into the water. That is his plan. Which I don't think actually happens because Kitty. Which I don't think actually happens because the next time that we see him, he is completely dry. Don't know what's going on with this film.
I don't think he gets terribly wet because we see him bouncing across the surface of the water.
So he breaks in, he sees the mutants being held in Stryker's operation and then he goes in and confronts Stryker in the operation. And this is where just so many things happen that just leave me absolutely so agog at the amount of crap that the film is literally just flinging over its shoulder at us. So there we see Logan's girl, Kayla Silver Fox, is still actually alive. Turns out Logan isn't actually out for revenge. His entire character motivation for the entire second act is removed. Turns out Victor never killed her anyway. It turns out Victor is just the same mass murdering rapist war criminal that he was always still really cool with, but they don't have anything personal against each other now. Turns out Kayla is also a mutant. She's a tactile telepath, so when she touches you, she can control you. And she's only working for Stryker because her sister is being held. Her sister, we should mention, is Emma Frost, secondary mutation, without the telepathy, but American. Why? Just why?
I think Canadian, because Silver Fox, I assume in the movie, although they never explicitly state it, is of Native American descent. And therefore her sister would also have to be, despite being a statuesque California blonde. And yeah, that's... For no reason, that whole bit where they have to blindfold Scott just so he doesn't see Wolverine at this time and therefore know exactly who he is when he spends years at the expansion. Maybe Scott does know, and he just instinctively hates Logan. He instinctively knew they'd be competing for a hot redhead one day.
They are in the surgery room where the team of surgeons is working on Weapon 11, Weapon X1. And Stryker is overseeing it. Logan has come charging in to confront Stryker. Kayla has revealed herself as being alive. Off in the shadows is Victor Creed, who is watching on. Logan, poured in by all this information, he's been tricked by this man. This is the man that has set him up, wanted to turn him into a remote weapon. He has set him up with a fake relationship with Kayla. So what does Wolverine do? He turns around and leaves the building. He literally walks.
I hate what you've done to me so much. I am coming to kill you. Oh wait, you've done more stuff, and in many ways it's worse. I'll have a nice life.
Leaves! Again, so many things going on. The fact that he can't sense that Victor is there. Victor is literally, I get the impression, another 40 feet away. The fact that he can't smell him, even if he's in a separate room, can't hear him, see him, whatever. Wolverine's supposed to have super senses. Apparently they're not working today. The fact that he's been gaslit, brainwashed, and manipulated by this guy that wanted to turn him into an automaton that has then been trying to capture him. And then Stryker doesn't call in any security. Wolverine just leaves. And Victor goes up to him afterwards and says, why did you just let him go? And I'm not sure who let who go here right now. What is going on?
Look, Stryker not doing anything at least makes a little bit of sense because Deadpool isn't ready. They say he needs another few hours for the bonding process to complete. His ace in the hole isn't there, so if the fight's going to wait for a few hours, then takes place further away from the current laboratory, that it's probably better for him. But yeah, Logan going, wow, man, you win, bye. Don't get that at all. That just came out of nowhere. It's a casualty, I think, of trying to make him a superhero for the kids rather than playing into the berserker rage. But in that case, your whole I'm going to murder you revenge plot is really a bad idea as your narrative propulsion if you're not even prepared to follow through with it.
He just loses all motivation multiple times during the movie. Because once he sees that Kayla's alive, he's no longer after revenge because he knows that Victor didn't actually do anything. He knows that Stryker is actually setting all this up, including the fake relationship with Kayla. He knows that Stryker is trying to turn him into a drone super soldier, but he just walks out. The closest you could have got to something is if he had heard of the general's murder and knew that the military was after Stryker. Then he'd be like, I'm going to turn you into the military police. And it'd be some sort of legal thing being like, I'm not going to kill you, even though I've killed everybody along the way. I just cannot get over movies too where they just kill their way to the final guy and then they spare the final guy. It's, you killed some dude working as a schlub security guard for him, but now you're going to spare the main bad guy?
It doesn't make narrative sense, it doesn't make character sense, but it makes commercial sense. Except if you look at the commercial results of the movie, it didn't make that much sense there either.
No, it absolutely didn't. Kayla then, for some reason, charges at Victor, who picks her up, and for some reason her powers don't work on him. She can't tactile control him to do anything. Logan comes in without his shirt and decides to have a fight with Victor, and this time absolutely whoops him, knocks him out. He breaks just enough of a sweat to give his muscles a really nice sheen, but doesn't seem to really bother him otherwise.
They could have really added something to this through line of the story if the reason that her tactile hypnosis didn't work on Creed was because of the healing factor. And if Logan saw that and figured out that his more powerful healing factor meant that it was never her manipulating him all along, that would have been a piece of information. It would have made the whole thing make sense, made all of the heel and face turns come together in the end. But yeah, we'll let the audience, we think, is stupid enough to believe that Gambit and Wolvie are now bros, pick up the vague, breadcrumb we've left in this direction.
Oh my god, I love that, man. The idea of the healing factor making it resistant, so then he knows that she actually was in love with him. The people working on this were incredibly talented. Right. I just think that somewhere along the lines literally got crossed. People are working things by committee, and whatever original idea that they had got so muddled by the bureaucracy of the studio that you ended up with this absolute mess.
Even though we're having a lot of fun here ripping on this fairly mediocre movie, I'm a big believer in the mystery is why are so many movies actually good rather than why are a handful as bad as this one. The amount of hands, the long time frame, just the sheer difficulty in getting every camera shot perfect, and from a narrative point of view and being able to string that together. Every good movie is a miracle, and every bad movie is a lot of people's really hard work, and I respect everybody who worked on this film, even though I don't respect the finished product that much, apparently.
Cheers to that. Absolutely cheers to that. Even when you're trying to do any sort of visual storytelling, even when I'm laying out a comic book, I lay it all out in order so I can transport the characters' journeys through the entire book and know that it's going to consistently make sense as they go from one scene to the next. They do not have that luxury in films. They jump around all the time, which is why characters cannot be wet even after they've just jumped into the water. To your point, it's an absolute miracle when things match up. When they've just done take after take, and sometimes it's not the best take, but it's the takes that match up emotionally or continuity-wise, or whatever it is the director's looking for, or that feed the theme of or the sense of the scene. It is absolutely juggling chainsaws. You are 100% right. The fact that any movie gets made in any coherent form is a ridiculous miracle.
I can't imagine anybody within the sound of our voice not having some experience of getting lost in the weeds in their job or in their hobby and getting focused on some details and overworking those and losing sight of the big picture. It's a very human thing to do, particularly under a time-crunched production schedule.
One of the things that I always believe in is iteration, and that is the idea that the more times that you manage to make your way through a story and see it from different points of view, the better off that you're going to be. Sometimes it's time. Sometimes time can just give you the space that you need to create that iteration. One of the things that I do is I write a script, I'll then storyboard it out, which is again one of those things when you see Ridley Scott completely storyboarded all of Alien. Jim Cameron storyboards almost all his movies from start to finish, every single frame. James Gunn trots out shoe boxes full of index cards of all his storyboards for each one of his movies. They go through and they iterate that process through the storyboard so that by the time they actually get to the set, they've managed to draft that thing multiple times visually before they even get there. They solve the problems. It's really just their way of...
George Miller's Fury Road is the shining example of that process.
Our buddy Mark Sexton, who helped George with those storyboards, actually, are incredible storytellers. And George was really iterating so much of the story again and again because he would see it visually and be like, that's not right, that's not what I want. And just really think about it, how the shots would flow together and work together, and solving it with just pen and paper before getting thousands of people on set to try and create that fleeting moment. But as to your point, sometimes you just don't get that time.
By no means is that the only way to make a good movie, but effects-heavy productions like Fury Road, like Wolverine Origins, it's the proven way because you've got so many different disparate elements. You have to get a 5-degree shift in frame of reference is going to result in something not being what you envision and what you hope for. You getting that vision onto paper. And comic artists have long worked in storyboarding and design in Hollywood for the ability to translate that into a visual narrative.
Weapon 11 X1 is launched, and it turns out to be Wade Wilson, who they've sewn his mouth up. Remember, they referenced that from the start of the film. Structure, people, foreshadowing, setup, it's all there. They intended to do this with Ryan Reynolds. He has all the superpowers that we've seen everybody have, except for the techno ability from Bolt. But he can teleport. He's got Cyclops' eye beams, but we never saw the mutant that had the giant katana blades attached in his arms, which he has for some reason.
Which make even less sense than the claws. Those things have seriously got to get up into his upper arm, given how long the...
Just...
Let me shake your hand, fellow human.
To be fair, he probably doesn't have a lot of need for shaking hands, and he probably just has a catheter, so he doesn't need to really do anything else. Meanwhile, Scott Summers and the rest of the team are being guided away by a mysterious voice taking them to safety. Logan is getting his ass beat, so he decides to climb up to the top of one of the coolant towers, and then is just like, hey, how are you going to get up here now? And then Weapon 11 just teleports up there. Weapon 11 proceeds to almost decapitate Wolverine, who is then rescued by Victor Creed. The two of them go back to back, fighting off the Deadpool. Should we talk about the Deadpool? Do you want to? It is a pool, a collection of names, because we're so clever. We've taken something so silly, and we have turned it and made it into a real plot point. Because writing, because comic books.
The way they did it in the Deadpool movie is much smarter and actually makes sense. It was a dead pool. It was betting on the number of people this collection of assassins would kill. And this one, it's a pool. That part makes sense. You're pooling these genetic talents. The dead part is tacked on, though, because it's established that the people he takes from aren't dead. And Wade's not dead. Nobody's dead in this equation. Scott Summers is still alive. Logan is still alive after he had his healing factor stolen. So nobody in this equation is dead. But I guess just calling him Pool would not be as cool.
Or the maybe Deadpool, which could have been a bit confusing. I would have just gone for the X-Pool. That I would have been like, okay, I know that's not an IP, but yeah. What is it with all these movies, and we're going to get into X1 too, they're constantly messing with the mutant gene in a way that I don't believe the comics have done so. You can take someone's X powers out of them and put them into someone else. I don't believe that happens in the comics. In X1, you create a machine that can turn humans into mutants. I don't believe that ever happened in the comics. All these movies feel the need to play with these superpowers all the time.
It's a complete lack of respect for the core conceit of the entire X-Men universe. There are power extraction and absorption aspects to some of the X-Men villains, the Sentinels primarily, but also like Mr. Sinister will harvest genetic material from his favorite mutant bloodlines. And yeah, you can't just implant Wolverine's gene into you, for example.
And then we get to the other big thing that just absolutely boggles my mind. So Stryker gets a gun which fires adamantium bullets, and the scientist says to him, hey, you know that's not going to kill him. And he goes, yes, but it will erase his memory. What? What? When? How? What? It doesn't work like that. And she gives him that look where she's good luck with that before she just pieces out.
I think the basic idea works fine. His brain will grow back, but it will grow back under its genetic imperatives, not through the forged pathways which make up memories. But for it to a shot or two to the head to wipe out all his memories, that thing's got to caroom in there for a while and turn the whole thing into soup. You can't just aim for the memory cortex.
It goes into his head. I don't know if it goes into, I think it just bounces off his head. Because otherwise he'd have a hole there permanently in his head from where an adamantium bullet went into his skull. 2 of them, in fact, because he gets double tapped. You're right. So the way bullets kill people is they go into us and they just bounce around inside us and just shred all our organs. And maybe it does that with his brain. So he's got like an adamantium bullet floating around in there.
But he still remembers how to talk. He still remembers how to growl at the camera. You can take everything from him.
That's true. He does remember certain stuff. Oh yes, by the way, before the fight with Victor Creed, growling at the camera, don't forget to take a drink there. It is just absolutely ridiculous. He then somehow gets knocked out. So Kayla makes contact with Stryker and instead of killing him, tells him to just keep walking. Once your feet start bleeding, just keep walking. Okay. Meanwhile, the kids turn out that the voice inside Scott Summers' head is an absolutely plastic, de-aged Patrick Stewart. And that the only uncanny thing about this X-Man is the valley that he's crawling out of. It is horrific, and it is also a testament to the de-aging technology that they're using today, because holy crap, this did not work out. All right, the other thing that gets me is Victor Creed lays a beating down on Wolverine so bad that he then wakes up in the hospital. The police got there, they found him unconscious, they called an ambulance, they ship him off to the hospital, boom, he wakes up. He takes 2 adamantium slugs to the head, boom, he's up in a couple minutes. Just the level of inconsistency again, healing at the speed of plot, just bothers me. He finds his dog tags, he sees it has Logan on it, it says he has Wolverine, that's all he remembers, because apparently the magic bullet has somehow taken his memory away. And he sees Gambit, and he's, I don't want to go with you, and so Gambit leaves. And Wolverine goes, and after all that effort they did to explain where the jacket came from, the jacket is still in the goddamn plane. Did Remy just drop it off as he was flying over his body and just chucks it out the side? Why would you do so much work to then forget something so important? I get to the end of this movie and I'm like, there's just absolutely no character arc. They're just bait and switch the main character with motivations just constantly. He has no consistent bad guy that he's after. First it's Victor, now it's not Victor. Maybe it's Stryker. Oh, it's not Stryker because I just don't care. I'm going to walk away. But oh, now I'm going to try and kill him. It just doesn't make... The whole film is just such a mess. Do you remember one of our favorite reviewers, Movie Bob, wrote down the entire plan that Lex Luthor had to do in Batman vs. Superman, which included 181 things, including like piss in a jar.
Piss in a jar.
One of the things that gets me here, all right, is Stryker. So what's Stryker trying to do? He's trying to make super soldiers that he can control. Oh, by the way, through a keyboard. He literally has to type engage for his soldier to engage.
This is 2009. We're not talking 1978 here. He could have had a microphone. We've just injected adamantium into the skeleton of somebody, combined genetic traits, and put them into an actual functioning, existing adult. But yeah, voice commands. Whoa, dude. Nobody will believe that.
You better type, buddy. Get typing. So he's had his Team X for a while, and I think after Logan leaves, I need these soldiers under my absolute control. So, but even before that, he'd started researching adamantium. At some point decided, oh hey, we can put adamantium onto some guy's bones. Doing all his research, despite knowing all of Wolverine's pain threshold, he completely underestimates all of Logan's powers. So he plants Kayla as an undercover honey trap to keep an eye on Logan, knowing full well that this man is a human lie detector. He lies to Logan, barefaced multiple times. So his original plan is to then kill Bradley and then to lie to the human lie detector that he doesn't know who killed Bradley and that Wade is still alive. Then he doesn't have Victor pretend to kill Kayla, knowing that the guy has superhuman senses. He takes the risk that his drug will cover up her heartbeat. Why wouldn't he just kill her? Things so much easier with her dead.
Because plot, Jason. Because plot.
Because plot. So somehow Logan is fooled and he picks a fight with Victor, but he then has to take the risk that Victor can beat Logan in a fight, even though we've never actually seen that established, which also would have been cool if it had been established earlier in the movie that Logan could never beat Creed. That every time they'd gone toe-to-toe, Creed had always put him down and be like, sit down, little brother.
They did establish that Creed tossed him around fairly easily when they were in their natural state, pre-adamantium. The log truck fight.
That's what I'm talking about, though. But prior to that, he'd never seen them fight. And he needs Creed to beat Logan in that fight so that Logan will be desperate enough to undergo the adamantium procedure. He doesn't know that Creed can beat Logan. And even then, when Logan is beaten that badly and that unconscious, why wouldn't you just restrain him and then take him to the Weapon X facility right then? You don't need to take the chance that he's going to then come around and be like, hey, daddy, I need me some adamantium.
If you had a tactile hypnotist who could touch somebody and make them walk until their feet bleed and then keep walking, why not just have her go up and go, come with us to the lab, Logan? Why go through the develop a long bonded relationship with him? Why not just say, come with me, dude? Hell, that'd probably work on me, whether she had powers or not.
There is a point where she could have been like, hey, Logan, I need you to do this. Even if she wasn't using her powers.
The film was in production during a writer's strike. No, so much more makes sense.
This script has absolutely been in development hell. And then they probably just rushed it out after the strike or just didn't have writers working with it at the time and just, oh my God. I feel like Gavin Hood came into it totally ready to bat above what he'd done before, beset by production and studio. And I don't know if the man's ever had a real chance to show what he could do, but he certainly didn't get a chance with this film, which is a crying shame.
And again, he could have barely any actual relationship to what we see on screen. It's hard to blame individuals, no matter how much we want to walk up to a few people and go, what were you thinking?
Look, I'm pretty sure it's some exec at Fox who could take singular blame for this absolute monstrosity. Someone who probably still managed to keep their job. So my question looking forward to Deadpool and Wolverine is, will Wolverine recognize the name Wade Wilson? Will he recognize the vague similarity? Will he recognize the Deadpool name? That's the link right now.
The whole multiverse thing, which Wolverine are we getting? Is it the one from this universe? Is it the one from the universe of the Deadpool movies? Because if this movie is part of the X-Men canon, then the Deadpool movies really can't be, because they have a completely different origin for Deadpool.
I think we'll be cherry-picking our universes, and it'll be very curious to see what they come up with. With one Marvel release for the entire year, this is a level of breathing room that we have been begging for. Yeah. And it's something I can genuinely get excited about. Now, here's the thing. I do really love Wolverine. I've always enjoyed him as a character. I bought multiple issues of his solo run with Chris Claremont. John Buscema. My apologies. Great stories. Always really enjoyed Wolverine. Always really liked him. Never loved him. Always really liked him. Tolerated Deadpool, but this being the only MCU entry, I'm pretty excited to see how this is gonna go. I hope it's gonna be good.
I just hope it's as witty as the first Deadpool and slightly less fan servicey than the second one.
That second one, I'm very curious to go through that second one with you again. I've only watched it once. I'm very curious to see it for a second time. That first one, though, I've seen several times. I think it's a really good film. The only limiting factor is just how much Ryan Reynolds I can handle in any one sitting. It's a lot. You made the greatest observation the other day where you said if Ryan Reynolds was playing another character in every other role and only turned this on for Deadpool, I would love Deadpool, but the fact that every other character he plays is Deadpool also is, apart from a handful of movies, just makes it all a bit tired for me.
Look, Van Wilder movies, part of the Deadpool cinematic universe. Six Underground, part of the Deadpool cinematic universe. The Hobbs and Shaw, is it? The one he's in with The Rock?
Where he plays the gay CIA agent, I think. Pretty close enough, yeah. Bantering along. I'm pretty sure Red Notice is part of the Deadpool universe. I don't think Buried is, but that's probably the only. Blade 3. Blade 3, absolutely
Blade
part
3.
of the...
Deadpool cinematic universe. Ryan Reynolds. His character is always Ryan Reynolds. And the alliteration actually fits. It's a perfect comic book name.
So, everybody, do not forget to make sure you've watched Loki before you go see Deadpool. I think that is probably some of the most important homework to go check out.
If Marvel is doing it right, you don't need to actually see anything. They'll bring you up to speed as much as you need to be brought up to speed. But it should add layers and peppering and meaning, which is ideally what we want from this continuity, not a litany of homework to do before we can enjoy a particular motion picture.
100%. Look, I also just am very sensitive to people's time. And I think one of those things that if you want to wring the most out of it on the first watch through, then perhaps watch these other things beforehand, which you will enjoy, which are good television to begin with. If you do not care and you just want to be able to watch it, you're just going to watch these things endlessly, do whatever you want.
Find your joy. And I'm really bristling against the idea that as fans of something, we are therefore obligated to consume every part of it. That's not an organic fan idea. That's a corporate idea. That's accountants wanting you to do that. As a fan of much of this material, I want you to watch what you want to watch and enjoy what you enjoy. And that's it. If it works on those levels, it's a good thing. And if it doesn't work on those levels, it's not for you.
Couldn't have said it better. We hope that we have been able to bring some level of entertainment or joy or interest to this completely uninteresting movie. We went where you did not have to go and should not ever go again. If ever the thought should cross your mind, maybe I should watch X-Men Origins Wolverine. Just don't. As your friend, imagine my hand on your shoulder saying, don't do that, okay? There's a better life for you.
Seriously, just hammer your testicles into a step stool. It's a better use of your time. It will be slightly less painful.
Thanks so much for joining us in this conversation. Next week, we're going to go back to 2002 with X-Men 1. The big question, does it still hold up? What's it like watching Origins and in X1? If you're interested in my comics, please check out Joker Harley Criminal Sanity. We had a psychiatric consultant work with the team to make this as forensically accurate as possible. I actually had a New York cop come up to me and tell me that it was one of the best police procedurals that he'd ever read. You can find it on Amazon.com or at your local comic book shop. And please check out Artemis, the comic that I wrote and art directed with Lindsay Sterling. I also did all the layouts for all the issues and our 3 fantastic artists from Japan, Korea, and China. You can grab that at one of her concerts or at her site. And lastly, going berserker rage on that like button, hitting subscribe will make sure you don't miss our entire X journey to Deadpool Wolverine. In the meantime, there's tons of superhero conversations and essays from Scott and I right here on my YouTube channel. Please enjoy. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time. How do you hang out with your friends? Restaurants, bars, clubs, maybe over at someone's house just staring at a TV screen or just sort of hanging out. And if you sit around watching a movie, that's cool, but you're not really talking. I still, hand on my heart, believe that the best way to hang out with your friends is to play a role-playing game. Unlike a board game, role-playing games are not competitive. They are cooperative. You and your friends actually hanging out and creating stories and moments that you'll look back on and laugh at together. But the worst thing about role-playing games is getting started. There's a lot of rules, and being the games master takes a heck of a lot of preparation time each week. Enter GameMastersForHire.com. If you've always wanted to play Dungeons & Dragons, GameMastersForHire.com are experts at teaching you all the rules while taking you on an epic adventure. And if you're loving it, you can play the same character every session, who will then get more and more powerful. If you're a wannabe dungeon or game master, there's no faster way to learn and be great at it than booking a training session with GameMastersForHire.com. For the experienced D&D groups out there, if you're looking for a special birthday gift for your DM, the best gift you can give is to let them be a player for a change by booking a birthday adventure. GameMastersForHire.com will make sure the guest of honor is treated like a hero on their special day. Game Masters for Hire can also run games for anyone, From dinner parties to kids' parties, corporate events, bachelor or bachelorette nights, to ongoing campaigns every week where you play the same character every session, it's like a story that you're building with your friends. GameMastersForHire.com are available online, which is how I play with them. But if you live in the greater Los Angeles area, they can do in-person games with miniatures and sets that'll blow your mind. Please visit GameMastersForHire.com for more information. Reach out to Ollie and his team, and they'll help you out, whatever you need. And just like going out to dinner, split the cost between the lot of you. I'll even kick in. Just use my offer code BADOWER for 10% off your first game. I promise you're going to have an amazing time that you'll always remember. Thank you, GameMastersForHire.com, for sponsoring this video. Talking about Jim Lee as a iconic Wolverine artist. So what I'm really curious as to who else you guys think are iconic Wolverine artists. Because when it comes to Jim, I think his take on Superman is good. I think his take on Batman is great. And I think his take on Wolverine is just light years even above that. I feel that what he did with the Wolverine character, the way to visually translate him, to still make him this short, hairy, muscled, true to the character, but still just bring something else to him that was absolutely amazing. Silvestri. Oh my God, Mark Silvestri's Wolverine is absolute money. And yeah, Mark Silvestri is just one of the nicest guys. John Byrne, yeah, he's the guy who pretty much carried Wolverine on his shoulders and just dragged him kicking and screaming into the spotlight.
I honestly think the way we see and picture Wolverine is the Byrne version. It's the definitive Wolverine for me. Even though we had Frank Miller and John Buscema doing seminal runs on solo titles, it's really that sort of Byrne, brown and orangey Wolverine that is Wolverine when I think of him.
For me, Byrne is the template or the bones of the idea that everybody else has thrown meat onto and developed it into different ways. Two more quick names. I think Barry Windsor Smith does an amazing Wolverine. I think his rendition of Weapon X was absolutely off the chart. And I don't know why, but Kent Williams from Havoc Wolverine Meltdown, there was something about the way he drew Wolverine that I just felt that was the first time that I saw him as a real person. There was something so convincing where he translated this two-dimensional character into this beautifully painted art that really affected the way that I perceive Wolverine. Yeah, Liefeld does a good Wolverine.
He had a lot of practice during Bloodwolf and Berserker and whoever that dude from Bloodstrike was, and half the cast of X-Force and all the other knockoffs he threw in there.
It's quite funny you talk about the knockoffs because the whole origin of Deadpool is a knockoff. So Liefeld comes up with the idea of Deadpool, he comes up with the name, and he comes up with the costume. And he takes it to, is it Fabian Nicieza? I've never pronounced the guy's name. How would you say?
I did look this up some years ago, and of course I've forgotten and reverted back to like how I read it as a 12-year-old.
So anyway, he approaches Fabian, and he says, hey, I've got this character. And Fabian just looks at it, it's just, hey dude, it's basically joke. It's Slade Wilson. And so he even calls him Wade Wilson as a riff to point out to Liefeld that it's basically just Deathstroke. The brilliance of why Liefeld came up with Deadpool, though, is he goes, look, I'm drawing the X books, and every month, the other book that is competing for my sales is Spider-Man. So I want the X books to have a Spider-Man, and I want him to be an agile killer with a mouth who just talks like that. The calculating brilliance of trying to capture that market was literally $1 billion idea. So it is absolutely hats off to Liefeld for that. It's some very good thinking.
Personal take is Rob likes to take too much credit and doesn't give Fabian especially any respect, but it also overlooks the contributions of Joe Kelly, especially in defining the character as we know him today.
100%. Deadpool has absolutely been a journey of a character, like from where he started to where he is now. It is almost absolutely unrecognizable except for in terms of just how he looks. But the personality, the core, the drive of the stories and who the character is so different. None of that was in anything that Liefeld and Fabian worked on, respect to them both. But they created an absolutely wonderful template that other incredible creatives were able to build on into the idea that we know today. It was Deadpool.
And I also think Rob is very precious about his creation when it was like explicitly and deliberately, let's make Deathstroke the Terminator part Spider-Man.
It's pretty much, that's how you get original characters. You just smash two of them together until eventually they stick.